All right, plant detectives, you're ready for a deep dive.
Always.
This one's a real head scratcher. Potential sabotage in the garden.
Ooh, intrigue right from the start.
We're talking herbicide injury, and before you click away thinking, chemicals, boring,
Yeah, who needs a lecture on weed killer, right?
trust me, this is way more interesting and important than it
It
sounds.
really is. Gardeners run into this all the time.
Exactly. And you sent in some great resources from Oklahoma State University and Yard and Garden.
Two very different perspectives on this, which I always find helpful.
Me too. Helps us get the full picture. So this stuff is like a true crime drama for your plants. Buckle up.
Love that analogy.
Yeah,
And surprisingly common, too. Way more than people realize.
I bet. So no need to whip out the magnifying glass just yet. Let's lay down some groundwork. The Oklahoma State source, they really dive into the two main types of herbicides, selective versus non-selective.
Classic distinction, right? It sounds simple enough.
Right, but selective makes it sound all, like, precise and safe.
Targeted strike team only takes out the bad guys.
Exactly, but reading through this, it's not always so clear-cut.
Oh, absolutely not. That's where the unintended consequences come in, right?
Exactly. And one of the biggest red flags I saw, they were talking about soil sterilants. You'd think, okay, it's in the soil, it breaks down.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
Right. But they specifically mentioned tree roots reaching those chemicals years later, even under pavement.
Yeah, that stuff can hang around a lot longer than people think. It's a bit scary when you realize.
Seriously. So you might think you're just, like, clearing a little patch for a season.
Right, like a fresh start for the flower bed.
But depending on what you use, you could be impacting what grows there for years down the line.
Talk about a gardening legacy you didn't sign up for.
Yikes. It really highlights how important it is to understand what you're using.
Before you even open that bottle.
100%. Speaking of understanding, the Yard and Garden source got me thinking, how do you even know it's herbicide injury? Seems easy to just assume it's a disease, right?
Oh, for sure. Especially because the symptoms can be really similar sometimes.
So what, are there like secret handshakes only the herbicides use? How do we crack this code?
Luckily, there are some telltale visual cues you can look out for.
Okay, I'm ready to channel my inner plant detective.
Perfect, because this is where it gets fun. One of the most common signs is something called epinasty.
Epinasty. Sounds like a fancy dance move.
Right. Sadly, no. It's actually when your plant's leaves start to twist downwards.
Oh, so like they're wilting, but in a weird way.
Exactly, like a sad emoji, but with leaves.
Okay, so picture that. Sad leaves. That's our epinasty. What else?
Another giveaway is petiole twisting, which, again, sounds like it could be on Dancing with the Stars.
Right. Gardening terms are wild. So what is a petiole?
It's the stalk that connects the leaf to the stem, and if you see that all twisted up, could be our culprit.
Interesting. Leaves doing yoga poses they shouldn't be. Got it. But couldn't a disease do that too?
Good point. That's where the real detective work comes in. Diseases are often more picky about their victims. They target certain types of plants.
Okay, so it's like roses get this fungus, tomatoes get that blight.
Exactly. Herbicides, though, they're often not so picky. They impact multiple species in similar ways.
So if my roses, ND, my tomatoes, ND, my lawn are all doing the droopy twist.
Then it's probably not just a coincidence, right? More likely something they were all exposed to.
It's like one thing if only humans are getting a virus, but if every living thing in an area is sick.
Then you start looking for something environmental. Exactly. Makes you realize how careful we have to be.
For real. Okay, so how do herbicides go rogue like this? It's not just spilling weed killer, right? I was reading the Yard and Garden source. They talked about some really sneaky ways this can happen.
Oh, yeah. And it's often a perfect storm of factors, which makes it so tricky to pinpoint.
Sounds like we need to put on our deerstalker hats for this one. What's the first clue on our herbicide mystery tour?
Let's start with the case of the drifting herbicide. Seems straightforward, right? Blows in from somewhere else.
Makes sense. Wind carries things.
But it's way more insidious than you might think. This stuff can travel over a mile.
Wait, seriously, over a mile? That's like longer than a football field, so even if I'm being careful.
Your neighbor's weed killer could be affecting your prize-winning petunias.
That is terrifying. And then there's carryover, which just sounds ominous.
Right. Imagine you're just innocently bringing home some mulch or compost.
Trying to do right by your garden.
Exactly. And then, bam, it's harboring invisible herbicide residue.
Like a hidden poison pill for your plants. How are you supposed to know?
That's the tricky part. It's not always obvious.
Okay, so note to self, question your mulch dealer. Got it.
Always a good idea. And then, of course, there's improper use.
Which, again, sounds kind of obvious, but I'm guessing it's more nuanced than it seems.
Exactly. It's not always as straightforward as it sounds. Yeah.
Okay, so what are we talking about when we say improper use? It's not just like someone dumping an entire bottle on their roses, right?
Right. Though that does happen more often than you'd think, unfortunately. But it can be a lot more subtle, too.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, for starters, not reading the label carefully.
Oh, Con, we've all done that.
Exactly. You're excited to get out in the garden, sun shining. Who's got time for tiny print, right?
Guilty as charged. But you're saying those labels, they're actually important, more than just red tape.
More than you know. They're
Right.
packed with crucial information. Ignoring them, even little details, it can have big consequences.
Okay, good point. So read the label. That goes on the plant detective whiteboard for sure. What kind of things should we be looking for specifically?
Timing is a big one. A lot of labels will say things like, don't apply if it's windy, or only use during certain temperatures.
Makes sense. I mean, wind carries things, but temperatures, what's that about?
It can actually affect how the herbicide behaves, how potent it is, how quickly it breaks down, all sorts of things.
Huh, so like when you forget to shake your iced tea and that first sip is all sugar, not what you want with weed killer. So let's say, despite our best efforts, the damage is done. We find our plants looking a little off.
Time to put on our detective hats, right?
Exactly. What's our next move? Is there like a plant hospital we can rush them to? Miracle cure?
Oh, I wish. Sadly, as both these sources kind of point out, with herbicide injury, there's rarely a quick fix.
So we just wait.
Often, yeah. Once the damage is done, it's a waiting game. Give the plant time to try and recover.
Well, we bite our nails and hope for the best. Anything we can do in the meantime. Besides, like, sing to them.
Well, I mean, serenade away if it makes you feel better. But seriously, both sources stress good care is key here.
Right, like don't add insult to injury by neglecting their basic needs, right?
Exactly. Water consistently, fertilize if they need it, basically just minimize stress, support those plant immune systems.
Got it, TLC, because the last thing a struggling plant needs is more stress. Okay, question for my fellow veggie gardeners out there. What happens if the herbicide injury is on something you're going to eat?
Ah, yes, the edible dilemma. This is tricky.
So if my prize-winning tomatoes are suddenly doing that epinasty droop, no more BLTs.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but yeah, when it comes to edibles, both sources were pretty clear. Better safe than sorry.
That's tough, especially for those of us who, like, dream of garden fresh salsa all winter long. But point taken. Prevention is key here, wouldn't you say?
Key. An ounce of prevention is worth, I don't know, a whole greenhouse full of cure, when the only cure is basically hope.
Prevention it is. Okay, so let's talk takeaways. What are the top things? Like, if every gardener out there could write this down on a little index card, what are our biggest defenses against herbicide heartbreak?
All right, I like this. Actionable advice. Number one, hands down. Know your labels. Don't just toss that little booklet that comes with the herbicide.
Easy to do. They end up in the recycling bin with the Amazon boxes half the time.
Resist the urge. That label, it's your plant's first line of defense. Treat it with respect.
It's tempting to think of them as just like legal mumbo-jumbo, but you've said it, crucial info. What should we be paying close attention to besides the application timing we talked about?
Keep an eye out for the term re-entry interval. This tells you how long you need to wait after applying the herbicide before it's safe to be around those plants again, both for you and any curious critters who might take a nibble.
Oh, wow. So it's about protecting ourselves, too, not just the plants.
Exactly. It's about overall safety.
Re-entry interval noted.
What else? Amendment awareness. Big one. We touched on this earlier with the mulch, but it's worth repeating. Herbicide residue can linger in all sorts of unexpected places. Mulch, compost, manure, even the soil itself.
Like a spooky, invisible herbicide ghost. I'm totally adding beware of herbicide ghosts to my garden journal.
Right. It's both accurate and terrifying. So we're being label experts, amendment sleuths. What else can we do to prevent herbicide injury in our gardens? Well, besides being super vigilant ourselves, which, let's face it, we can't be watching every breeze and every bag of compost 24/7.
Right, like we do have lives outside the garden sometimes.
Exactly. So another layer of defense is asking questions, tapping into the experts out there.
Oh, good point. Because not all heroes wear capes. Some wear gardening gloves, right? Who should we be grilling with our herbicide inquiries?
Your local garden center is a great place to start, or your county extension office.
Oh yeah, extension offices, those are like a gold mine of info, aren't they?
The best. Staffed with actual horticulturalists, they can offer advice tailored to your region. your specific plants.
It's like having a whole team of plant detectives on call.
Exactly. They can help you track down the source of a problem or even recommend safer alternatives to herbicides altogether, depending on what you're dealing with.
Because there's always another way, right? To tackle those pesky weeds, I mean,
Always. And it might be different depending on your climate, your soil, so many factors.
so much to consider. This is reminding me of something you said earlier about those long-lasting soil sterilants. It really makes you think about the long game, you know?
Absolutely. Every gardening choice we make, the herbicides we use, the amendments we bring in, it all has ripple effects. It's like that old saying, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children.
So true. Which is a little daunting, but also kind of empowering, right? Like, we can make choices that make a difference.
Exactly. And that's really what it comes down to. Being informed, being observant, asking for help when you need it.
Love that. Well, plant detectives, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. I know I'm going to be examining every bag of mulch with a magnifying glass from now on.
Me too.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not about being scared to garden or feeling like you need a degree in chemistry to grow a tomato. It's about staying curious, staying vigilant, and always asking questions.
Beautifully said. Knowledge is power, especially in the garden. So until next time, happy gardening, everyone. And remember, keep those plant detective hats close at hand.